Before my heart learned to be careful, it loved without counting the cost. I believe closeness was simple, that if you stayed, nothing would be lost. I reached without checking the ground first, trusted every warm reply. I didn't know some connections only feel safe until you rely. I thought love was supposed to be easy, that effort would meet effort halfway. I didn't know hearts need protection when care isn't offered the same. Before my heart learned to be careful, it gave without holding back. Not reckless, not naive, just open in ways I can't go back. We didn't break in a single moment, no truth I could prepare. Before my heart learned to be careful, I believed love would stay if I stayed there. I spoke before thinking it through, shared feelings while they were raw. I assumed being honest was safe, that love would know what to do with it all. You listen, but not all the way. Held parts, but let others fall. I learned how vulnerability lingers when it's received, but never really held it all. I confused access with intimacy, attention with being known. But love shouldn't feel like exposure if care doesn't follow you home. Before my heart learned to be careful, I stayed when things felt unclear. I trusted potential and patience, mistaking silence for reassurance instead of fear. You said I didn't mean to hurt you, like meaning was enough. Before my heart learned to be careful, I didn't know good intentions always love. Maybe being careful isn't closing, it's remembering what it cost. Because loving without protection is how you slowly lose parts of yourself you never meant to offer it all. I didn't stop believing in love, I didn't grow distant or cold. I just learned my heart deserves care before it's fully unfolded. Now I pause before leaning in, notice how effort appears. I listen to how I'm treated when I'm quiet, when I'm unsure, when I'm here. I still love deeply, still feel fully, just not without being seen. I don't give access automatically before care shows me what it means. Before my heart learned to be careful, I stay longer than I should. Not because I didn't feel the warning, but because I remembered the good. I'll remember that version of me gently, the one who loved without fear. even if it learned to protect itself from here. Being careful doesn't mean you stop loving. It means you learned. And if your heart learned to be careful, you didn't lose your softness. You gave it boundaries. You're still capable of deep love. Now you just make sure it's met with care before it's given away. Your presence felt thin, like it could tear if I leaned in. You were here but barely touching the moment, the room, my skin. You sat beside me with your body, but your attention wandered ahead. I learned how someone can stay seated while already leaving in their head. I thought presence was proximity, that closeness meant you were near, but presence has weight to it, and yours was barely here. Your presence felt thin, and I felt it in my chest. Not absent, not neglectful, just light in ways that never let me rest. We didn't fight, we didn't fall, no reason to begin. Your presence felt thin, and my heart couldn't lean on it anymore without bending in. You answered when I spoke to you, but now it's something that stayed. Your eyes skimmed past my feelings like depth wasn't something you planned to engage. I learned how to shorten my sentences so they wouldn't ask too much. I didn't want my need to feel seen to feel heavier than your touch. I confused availability with care, being there with being in. But love shouldn't feel like guessing if someone's heart is listening or just passing through again. Your presence felt thin, I noticed it over time, in the way my honesty slowed down, unsure if it still had a place to arrive. You said I'm right here, aren't I? Like that was enough to defend. Your presence felt thin, and I realized I was holding more of us than you ever did in the end. Maybe presence requires courage, the kind that stays when it's real, because showing up fully means letting yourself actually feel. I didn't need constant attention or someone perfectly aware. I just needed presence that stayed solid when I reached for it, not something that vanished in air. Now I listen to how presence lands, whether it holds or fades. I trust the love that feels grounded, not the kind that thins out when it's asked to stay. I want someone who's presence settles? Who doesn't feel halfway gone? I don't wanna love someone again who's technically here, but emotionally already moved on. Your presence felt thin, and I stayed longer than I should. Not because I didn't feel the lack, but because I remembered the good. I remember us without bitterness, without blaming how you tried. Your presence felt thin, and choosing myself is how I learned. Love should feel solid and warm, not something you question in the room, not something that makes your heart feel like it's leaning on air, hoping it won't fall through. Some people stay physically, but leave emotionally. And if someone's presence felt thin, you were asking for too much. You were asking for love that shows up with weight, with intention, with care. You deserve a presence that holds you when it arrives. Right. We talked but didn't arrive, not anywhere new or safe. Our words kept circling the feeling like they were afraid to land in one place. We explained ourselves carefully, used calm to keep things kind, but every sentence felt like motion without direction, like we were speaking past the point where truth wanted time. I thought talking meant progress, that clarity would appear, but you can say everything out loud and still not be heard here. We talked but didn't arrive, and that confused my heart. Not unheard, not dismissed, just unfinished. From the start, we didn't argue, didn't decide. No door, we closed the light. We talked but didn't arrive, and love stayed mid-sentence, unable to survive. You listened with patience and logic, I spoke with care and restraint. We sounded healthy to everyone else, but nothing inside us actually changed. I learned how to explain my pain without letting it feel real, because whenever truth got close, it softened itself like it didn't want to make you feel what I feel. I confuse communication with connection, dialogue with being close. Love shouldn't feel like a meeting when no one actually shows. We talked but didn't arrive. I felt it late at night, in the way my heart stayed restless after all the words sounded right. You said at least we're honest now, like honesty was the end. Couldn't carry us in. Maybe arriving requires vulnerability, the kind words can't protect. Because once you really arrive somewhere, you have to stay and accept. what's there. I didn't need more conversations or better ways to explain. I just needed our words to finally land and not keep leaving me halfway. Now I listen for arrival, not just sound in the air. I trust the love that moves inward, that doesn't stop at understanding, but dares to care. I want conversations that change something, that leave my heart at rest. I don't wanna keep talking forever if arriving is something we never do next. We talked but didn't arrive, and I stayed longer than I should. Not because I didn't feel the distance, but because I remember the good. I remember us without resentment, without blaming how we tried. We talked but didn't arrive, and choosing myself is how I learned love should reach somewhere real, not live only in language and sound. Not keep your heart moving in circles while calling it progress when nothing ever settles down. Not every conversation is connection. Some are avoidance and softer words. And if you talk but didn't arrive, you weren't failing at communication. You were noticing that love needs more than language. It needs presence that stays. Hush when I carry the soft part alone, the part that quietly I protected what still believed, while pretending I was fine, being strong endlessly. You leaned on logic and distance, on reasons that sounded mature. I held a fragile understanding that love still mattered, even when it was insecure. I thought softness was something shared, a place we both arrived, but softness became my responsibility, just to keep what was left alive. I carried the soft part alone, and it grew heavy in my chest. Not weak, not unrealistic, just tender in ways that needed rest. We didn't fight, we didn't fall, no line to overstep. I carried the soft part alone, and that's when love began to feel like a debt. I spoke gently even when it hurt, chose kindness over truth. I didn't want my feelings to sound like pressure or proof that you were already halfway gone. I kept the warmth alive for both of us. When yours began to fade, I told myself this was patience, not loneliness, learning how to be brave. I confused compassion with self-erasure, care with holding it all, but love shouldn't ask one heart to stay soft. was more sensitive, like softness was wrong. I carried the soft part alone until even my tenderness started feeling too long. Maybe softness scared you because it asked you to feel, and feeling would have meant staying present, not retreating behind what's safe and real looking. I didn't need you to be perfect or always know what to do. I just needed you to help me hold the part of love that was still true. Now I guard my softness differently, not by hiding it away, but by offering it carefully wherever knows how to stay. I still believe softness is strength, just not something I'll prove. I don't wanna carry it alone again with someone who benefits from what they refuse to move toward. I carry the soft part alone, and I stay longer than I should. Not because I didn't feel the imbalance, but because I remember the good. I remember us without bitterness, without blaming how we grew. I carry the soft part alone, and choosing myself is how I learned love should protect tenderness, not place it on one heart to defend, not ask one person to stay gentle while the other stops showing up in the end. Softness isn't weakness, it's courage without armor. And if you carry the soft part alone, you were naive. You were loving deeply in a place that didn't know how to hold you back. You deserve someone who helps you carry it. Love slow without warning, no sign along the way. One day we were moving naturally, the next everything felt delayed. Your replies came softer, your touch arrived late. I felt the rhythm shift beneath us before words ever tried to explain. I thought love announces changes, the slowing comes with a name. But sometimes love just eases off and leaves you trying to match its pace. Love slow without warning, and I felt it in my chest. Not abandoned, not rejected, just behind where love used to rest. We didn't stop, we didn't end, no signal to ignore. Love slow without warning, and I was suddenly running alone towards something that wasn't moving anymore. I waited for you to catch up, assumed it was just a I kept adjusting my expectations so nothing would sound like blame. You said I'm just tired lately, like love was only pace, but effort doesn't quietly fade without leaving a trace. I confuse patience with alignment, stillness with being kind, but love shouldn't feel like slowing down while one heart keeps checking behind. Love slow without warning, I noticed it over days in the way my honesty hesitated, unsure if it would arrive too late. You said nothing's really wrong, like speed didn't matter anymore. Love slow without warning, and closeness couldn't keep up with what we were before. Maybe slowing felt safer for you than deciding where to go, because choosing direction means admitting what you already know. I didn't need love to move fast or rush to prove it was true. I just needed love to move with me, not away, while calling it normal to do. Now I listen to the tempo of care, to how effort shows its speed. I trust the love that keeps pace, that doesn't leave my heart trying to catch its feet. I want love that slows together, not one that leaves me behind. I don't want to adjust my heart again to a rhythm that's no longer mine. Love slow without warning, and I stay longer than I should, not because I didn't feel the shift, but because I remember the good. I remember us without resentment, without blaming how it changed. Love slowed without warning, and choosing myself is how I learned. Love should move with awareness and care, not quietly change the pace, not leave one heart still running forward while the other rate slowed away. Some endings don't come from stopping, they come from drifting speeds. And if love slowed without warning, you weren't impatient, you were listening to the moment your heart realized it was no longer being met where it was moving. That awareness matters. You look past the moment like it wasn't asking for you. Your eyes stayed fixed on tomorrow while something quiet was breaking through. I stood right in front of you with all I hadn't said, but you were already somewhere else, thinking ahead, leaving this moment unheld. I thought love lived in intention, in plans and future-proof lines, but love also lives in presence and noticing what's asking for you right now. You look past the moment, and I felt it in my chest. just unseen when being seen mattered the most. We didn't fight, we didn't pause, no signal to defend. You look past the moment and closeness never found its way in. You answer me with solutions, with reasons meant to help, but I wasn't asking for fixing. I was asking if you could stay with what I felt. You nodded, said the right things, but your attention moved on. I learned how easily presence slips when someone is already preparing what comes next. I confuse reassurance with care, advice with being close, but love shouldn't feel like being heard only after the moment is over. You look past the moment, I noticed it over time, in the way my honesty softened, afraid it would interrupt your timeline. You said we'll talk about this later, like later was enough. You look past the moment, and later never showed up. Past love. Maybe staying present felt heavy, like it asked you to slow down. 'Cause being in the moment means choosing what's real over what feels controlled and planned. I didn't need answers or certainty or promises to lean on. I just needed you to stay with me in the moment before it was gone. Now I trust the moments that linger, the ones that ask to be held. I listen when my heart says this matters now, not later, not shelved. I want love that looks at the moment, that doesn't rush past the truth. I don't wanna be loved by someone again who misses what's here while reaching for what's next. You look past the moment, and I stay longer than I should. Not because I didn't feel the absence, but because I remember the good. I'll remember us without bitterness, without blaming how you tried. You look past the moment, and choosing myself is how I learned. Love should arrive where you are, not somewhere it hopes to be. Not miss the present while promising a future that never meets me. Some love doesn't fail loudly, it misses quietly. And if someone looked past the moment, you weren't invisible. You were present with a heart that needed to be met right then. You deserve a love that sees the moment and stays. We shared a quiet distance, not measured, not discussed. It sat between our shoulders like something we both felt, but never touched. We moved through days politely, careful not to collide. I learned how far apart we were distance need attention, arguments raise replies, but distance can be gentle when neither heart wants to ask why. We shared a quiet distance and called it being calm, not broken, not dramatic, just quiet in a way that caused something to slowly dissolve. We didn't fight, we didn't end, no truth to announce. We shared a quiet distance and love, learned how to live without a sound. About my day in passing, I answered just enough. We traded warmth in small portions, so nothing would ask for too much. I noticed how my honesty paused mid-thought, mid-feel. It didn't know where to land anymore, like depth wasn't something that space could hold or heal. I confused peace with presence, silence with being okay, but love shouldn't feel like standing still while connection quietly moves away. We shared a quiet distance, I felt it settle in my chest, in the way my needs grew careful, unsure if they still deserve to exist. You said, we're fine, nothing's wrong, like quiet was proof. We shared a quiet distance and my heart learned how alone stillness can feel with you. Maybe quiet felt safer for us than naming what we'd lost, because once you speak the distance, you have to face what it costs. I didn't need noise or conflict or words to make it real. I just needed closeness that reached for me without having to be asked how I feel. Now I listen to the space between words, to how silence holds or breaks. I trust the quiet that feels shared, not the kind that slowly separates. I want love that shortens distance, that leans in when it's still. I don't wanna share quiet again if closeness is something only I'm trying to feel. We shared a quiet distance and I stayed longer than I should, not because I didn't feel the gap, but because I remember the good. I'll remember us without resentment, without forcing what couldn't stay. We shared a quiet distance and choosing myself is how I learned. Love should feel near even in silence, not something you sense by its absence, not something that lets you sit beside it while your heart whispers that it's already gone. Some distance don't echo, they settle. And if you shared a quiet distance, you weren't imagining it. You were listening to the space where love used to reach without asking. You deserve a love that closes the distance. together. Didn't know how to act without sounding like I needed too much. So I kept my questions gentle, held them just below my tongue. I watched you drift in small waves, nothing loud enough to name. I told myself love would notice without me having to explain. I thought a care would read between lines, that closeness didn't need a cue, but silence doesn't translate longing when no one leans in to hear you. I didn't know how to ask, and that's what hurt the most. Not unheard, not rejected, just waiting while my needs stayed unspoken. We didn't argue, didn't decide, no moment to unpack. I didn't know how to ask, and love quietly slipped through the gaps. Practice being low maintenance, smiled when things felt thin. I didn't want my wanting to sound like pressure or fear creeping in. You said if something's wrong, just tell me, but I didn't know where to start. I was afraid the moment I asked for more, I confirmed I was already asking alone. I confused being easy with being loved, quiet with being strong, but love shouldn't require you to hide your needs just to belong. I didn't know how to ask, I felt it settle in my chest, in the way my honesty hesitated, unsure if truth was welcome. Yeah, you said I didn't know you needed that, like need was my mistake. I didn't know how to ask because I didn't know if love would stay. Maybe asking felt dangerous, like it might tip the scale, because once you say what you need, you have to face whether someone is willing to meet you or not. I didn't need perfection or certainty or guarantee spoken aloud. I just needed to know that wanting more wouldn't make me too much or push you. Now I'm learning to speak sooner before silence learns my name. I trust the love that welcome questions, that doesn't make needs feel like shame. I don't wanna guess my way through love, I hope someone just knows. I wanna be able to ask and feel safe, no matter the answer. I didn't know how to ask, and I stayed longer than I should, not because I didn't feel the ache, but because I remembered the good. I'll remember us without resentment, without blaming what I lacked. I didn't know how to ask, and choosing myself is how I learned. Love should invite your voice gently, not wait for silence to speak. speak, not ask your heart to keep guessing if it's allowed to need. Some people don't leave because they don't care, they leave because they never learn how to ask and feel safe being heard. And if you didn't know how to ask, you weren't weak, you were careful with a heart that deserved to be met without fear. Your care reached the door, but it didn't step inside. You checked if I was breathing, not how I was surviving the night. You still it was easy, wherever stay polite. I felt your concern pause gently before it had to touch something real and alive. I thought care meant arrival, that noticing was enough, but care that never ends leaves a heart standing there, still hoping for love. Your care reached the door, and I felt the space between, not ignored, not abandoned, just alone where closeness should have been. We didn't fight, we didn't fall, no reason to implore. Your care reached the door, but it never crossed into me anymore. You asked the surface questions, listen long enough to leave. I learned how to answer lightly, so nothing would ask too much of your empathy. I held the heavier moments myself, didn't want to overwhelm your day. I told myself this was maturity, not loneliness, learning how to stay quiet out of the way. I confused checking in with showing up, concerned with being near, but love shouldn't stop at the doorway when someone is hurting here. Your care reached the door, I noticed it over time, and the way my honesty softened. Unsure if depth would cross the line, you said I care, you know that like care didn't need to move. Your care reached the door, and my heart learned how far care can go without becoming love. Maybe going deeper felt dangerous, like you'd have to stay, because once you step inside someone's pain, you can't pretend it's not your place to help them carry it. I didn't need fixing or answers or someone perfect and strong. I just needed care that didn't stop where it was comfortable for you to belong. Now I listen for care that enters, that doesn't hesitate or stall. I trust the love that steps inside when things get quiet, when walls begin to fall. I won't care that reaches my center, not just checks from the hall. I don't wanna love someone again whose care only knocks but never comes in at all. Your care reached the door, and I stay longer than I should, not because I didn't feel the distance, but because I remember the good. I remember us without resentment, without blaming how you tried. Your care step inside with intention, not hover where it feels safe, not leave one heart open in rooms while the other never crosses the threshold to stay. Some care is sincere, but incomplete. And if someone's can't reach the door, you weren't asking for too much. You were asking for love that enters, that stays, that doesn't leave your pain. Standing alone on the other side. Love became something I managed, not something I fell into. I tracked moods and measured timing, watched words so nothing fell through. I learned how to keep things stable, avoid the weight of too much truth. I treated love like a fragile system that needed maintenance, just stay in use. I thought maturity looked like control, that calm and we were safe. But love shouldn't feel like supervision or something I had to regulate. Love became something I managed, and it wore me down inside. Not dramatic, not chaotic, just careful all the time. We didn't fight, we didn't break, no reason to confess. Love became something I managed, and I forgot how love is supposed to rest. Adjusting my expectations daily, lowered my voice, softened my need. I made room for your comfort first, while mine learned how to retreat. I handled the emotional weather, read signs before they formed. I stayed one step ahead of distance, so nothing would sound like an alarm. I confused responsibility with devotion, balance with being strong. But love shouldn't feel like risk assessment or predicting what might go wrong. Love became something I managed. I felt it tight in my chest, in the way my honesty hesitated, unsure if truth would pass the test. You said we're doing okay, like okay was the goal. Love became something I managed, and slowly I stopped feeling whole. Maybe managing felt safer than letting love be alive, because aliveness brings uncertainty, and uncertainty can't be controlled or filed. I didn't need perfection, order, or love without risk or heat. feels heavy. When care turns procedural, I trust the love that flows naturally, not something that depends on me being vigilant. I want love that carries itself, that doesn't need my defense. I don't wanna manage love again like it's a problem waiting to happen, instead of a place to rest. Love became something I manage, and I stay longer than I should. Not because I didn't feel the imbalance, but because I remember the good. I remember us without resentment, without blaming how we tried. Love became something I managed, and choosing myself is how I learned love should feel mutual and alive, not something you supervise to survive, not something that turns your heart into a caretaker while connection quietly runs dry. Love isn't meant to be managed, it's meant to be shared. And if love became something you managed, you weren't controlling, you were compensating for a connection that stopped holding itself up. You deserve a love that carries you too. We avoided the middle of us, stayed near the edges instead. We talked about work and the weather, about anything. Wouldn't ask what was happening. Beginnings still sounded familiar, endings felt too hard to name. So we lived in the margins quietly, pretending the center would resolve itself if we didn't stay. I thought time would fill the distance, that space would soften the truth, but the middle doesn't heal itself when both hearts refuse to move. We avoided the middle of us, and I felt it every day. Not broken, not dramatic, just careful in a way that kept love at bay. We didn't fight, we didn't fall, no mess to discuss. We avoided the middle of us, and that's where connection quietly lost us. Checked in from a distance, I answered just enough. We stayed polite and functional, so nothing would sound too rough. I wanted to ask what we were becoming, but the question felt too real. Because once you stand in the middle, you have to face what you feel. I confuse calm with maturity, silence with being kind, but love shouldn't feel like circling truth, afraid of what you might find. We avoided the middle of us, I noticed it over time, in the way my honesty hesitated, unsure for something less. Maybe the middle has too much more courage than we had, because the middle holds accountability. It asks you to choose or admit you can't. I didn't need perfection or certainty, or love without risk or strain. I just needed us to stand where it mattered, not walk around what needed our names. Now I recognize avoidance faster, the way conversations bend. I trust the love that goes inward, that doesn't fear what lives in the center. I want connection that meets itself, not one that stays diffused. I don't wanna love again by avoiding the middle until there's nothing left to lose. We avoided the middle of us, and I stayed longer than I should. Not because I didn't feel the absence, but because I remembered the good. I remember us without resentment, without blaming what we feared. We avoided the middle of us, and choosing myself is how I learned. Love should step into the heart space, not orbit around what's true. Not leave your heart living on the edges while the center waits to be met by you. Some love doesn't break detours, and if you avoided the middle of us, you weren't careless. You were standing at the edge of something that needed courage to enter. You deserve a love that meets you in the middle. I held the ending quietly before it had a name. I felt it settle in my chest long before anything changed. Nothing shattered all at once. No moment has to be loud. The ending arrived like a knowing, like something my heart recognized before my mouth allowed. I thought endings came with clarity, with words you couldn't ignore. But some endings are carried softly until you can't carry them anymore. I held the ending quietly and smiled like I was fine. Not dishonest, not pretending, just careful with the truth and time. We didn't fight, we didn't fall, no reason to deny. I held the ending quietly and loved you while learning how to say goodbye. Inside, I kept showing up gently, didn't change the way I cared. I didn't want the ending to hurt you before you were prepared. Listen when something grows quiet, when love starts to feel thin. I trust the moments my heart speaks before endings have to be explained again. I don't regret holding it softly. I know I tried. I loved you enough to carry the ending before you ever asked why. I held the ending quietly, and I stayed longer than I should. Not because I didn't feel the truth, but because I remember the good. I remember us without bitterness, without rewriting what we were. I held the ending quietly, and choosing myself is how I learn. Love doesn't always leave lonely. Sometimes it exits with care. Sometimes the bravest goodbye is the one you hold in silence until your heart is ready to let it go into the air. Some endings unannounced, they're carried, and if you held the ending quietly, you weren't deceiving anyone. You were loving carefully until you learned you couldn't carry it alone any longer, any longer, any longer. I step back without leaving, still here, just not in the same way. I stayed in the room with you, but moved my heart out of reach of what wasn't staying. I stopped leaning into silence, stopped filling gaps with care. I wanted to see what remained if I wasn't always the one standing there. I thought distance meant goodbye, that space was how love ends. But sometimes stepping back is listening to what effort does when you stop carrying it for them. I stepped back without leaving, and it felt unfamiliar. Not cold, not retaliating, just quieter in how I protected myself. We didn't fight, we didn't break, no moment to grieve. I stepped back without leaving, and finally saw what love did when it wasn't being propped up by me. I answer slower, softer, let moments pass untied. I wanted to know if you'd reach when I wasn't already by your side. You said you feel distant lately, like distance wasn't already there. I realized how much closeness depended on me pretending not to care. I confused consistency with closeness, showing up with being near. But love shouldn't disappear the moment one heart stops tearing. I stepped back without leaving, I felt it settle in my chest. In the calm that followed ever when I stopped proving I deserve my best. You didn't follow, didn't ask, didn't notice the shift. I stepped back without leaving, and learned how quiet it gets when love is already drifting. Maybe stepping back scared you because it asked you to move. When I stopped meeting you as if you'd step forward too. I didn't pull away to punish you or to make you feel small. I stepped back to see if love would reach for me at all. Now I trust the space I create, what it shows me over time. I listen to who leans in naturally when I'm no longer reaching first every time. I want love that notices absence, that feels it when I slow. I don't wanna stand beside someone again who only feels close when I do all the moving alone. I step back without leaving, and I stay longer than I should. Not because I didn't feel the truth, but because I remember the good. I'll remember us without bitterness, without rewriting what I saw. I step back without leaving, and choosing myself is how I learn. Love should move towards you freely, not vanish when you pause, not ask your heart to keep advancing while the other never steps forward at all. Sometimes you don't leave, you stop compensating. And if you step back without leaving, you weren't giving up, you were checking whether love knew how to walk towards you on its own. That matters. Your silence stayed consistent, never cruel, never loud. It showed up the same every day, like distance that didn't need to explain itself out loud. You didn't disappear completely, you just stopped arriving inside. I learned how absence can feel stable when it never changes its mind. I thought silence meant confusion, something waiting to be cleared. But silence can also be a decision when nothing is coming near. Your silence stayed consistent, and I felt it settle in. Not shocking, not dramatic, just steady in the way it taught me what I wasn't getting. We didn't argue, didn't end. No truth you had to defend. Your silence stayed consistent, and consistency became the answer in the end. I checked for changes in your tone, for pauses that meant more, but your quiet stayed predictable, like you'd already closed the door. Expectations slowly adjusted what I'd ask. It felt easier than admitting that your silence was the most reliable part we had. I confused calm with patience, routine with being kind, but love should dependable thing they bring. Your silence stayed consistent, and I stayed longer than I should. Not because I didn't feel the truth, but because I remember the good. I remember us without resentment, without forcing what couldn't bend. Your silence stayed consistent, and choosing myself is how I learned love shouldn't feel like waiting forever. Not something you adapt your heart around, not something that teaches you to listen for effort that never makes a sound. Some silence isn't confusion, it's clarity. And if someone's silence stayed consistent, you weren't impatient, you were paying attention to the only thing that never changed. You deserve a love that responds. Love didn't feel chosen, it felt assumed. Like something we stepped into 'cause it was there, not because you reached for it and said my name. You stayed but without leaning, listen without arriving in full. I felt like an option you never reviewed, just something you kept because leaving would have taken more effort than staying dull. I thought love didn't need to be named, that presence meant it was real. But love grows quiet when no one actively chooses to feel. Love didn't feel chosen, and that hurt in a quiet way. Not unwanted, not rejected, just tolerated from day to day. We didn't fight, we didn't end, no reason to accuse. Love didn't feel chosen, and my heart started wondering if staying was something I was doing alone. For the two of us, you spoke like love was settled, like effort had reached its end. I learned how to stop asking for signs that you were still choosing me again and again. You said I'm here, aren't I? Like location proved intent, but being there isn't choosing if your heart never steps in all the way. I confuse consistency with devotion, familiar with being seen. But love shouldn't feel like a habit you maintain instead of a decision you keep making. Love didn't feel chosen, I felt it settle in my chest. In the way my needs grew careful, unsure if wanting more was asking too much from what you had left. You said, why are you questioning this, like love shouldn't be renewed? Love didn't feel chosen, and that question answered everything you never said out loud. Ooh, maybe choosing felt like pressure, like commitment you didn't want to name. Because choosing someone means showing up, even when it changes you, even when it costs something real. I didn't need grand gestures or vows or proof written in fire. I just needed to feel like love was something you picked again, not something you kept because it was already there. Now I notice when love feels when care stops reaching forward. I trust the love that chooses me clearly, not the kind that waits to be convenient or safe. I want love that feels intentional, that doesn't make me guess. I don't wanna stand beside someone again, wondering if I'm still being chosen or just quietly kept. Love didn't feel chosen, and I stayed longer than I should. Not because I didn't feel the absence, but because I remember the good. I remember us without bitterness, without rewriting what we were. Love didn't feel chosen, and choosing myself is how I learned. Love should feel deliberate and alive, not something you inherit or assume, not something that survives on routine while your heart waits to be picked again. Love isn't proven by staying, it's proven by choosing. And if love didn't feel chosen, you weren't insecure, you were listening to the place where love stopped reaching for you. You deserve a love that chooses you out loud and again. I let the days decide, because I was tired of forcing signs. I stopped asking the future questions it never answered in time. I showed up the same each morning, watched effort reveal its shape. Some things don't need confrontation, they explain themselves by what they never change. I thought love needed deadlines, a moment to draw the line, but days are honest witnesses when hearts stop showing up at the same time. I let the days decide, and they spoke quietly, not in endings or explosions, just absence repeating consistently. We didn't fight, we didn't break, no truth to dramatize. I let the days decide, and they showed me who stayed and who slowly stopped trying. I noticed how silence stretched longer, how warmth didn't return. I didn't rush to label anything, I let time do what it does best, reveal what's learned. You said nothing's really wrong, but days don't lie like words. They show you where effort lands, and where love is no longer hurt. I confuse patience with loyalty, waiting with being kind. But love shouldn't need endurance just to feel alive. I let the days decide, I felt it in my chest, in the way my hope grew quieter. Not defeated, just finally a rest. You didn't leave, you didn't stay, no clear goodbye. I let the days decide, and they chose for me what my heart could no longer deny. Maybe I stopped explaining, because explanation didn't change a thing. Consistency tells the truth without raising its voice or asking to be believed. I didn't need answers or closure or reasons dressed as care. I just needed to see if love would show up when no one was asking it to be there. Now I trust patterns over promises, how time treats what is real. I listen when days grow distant, when connection stops choosing to feel. I want love that survives the ordinary, not just moments that shine. I don't wanna beg for consistency again. I want love that lives in the days, not just in lines. I let the days decide and I stayed longer than I should, not because I didn't see the truth, but because I remembered the good. I remember us without resentment, without rewriting what we tried. I let the days decide, and choosing myself is how I learn. Love should show up daily and clear, not disappear between good intentions. Not ask your heart to keep waiting while time quietly moves on without you. Some answers don't come in words, they come in days. And if you let the days decide, you weren't avoiding the truth. You were listening to the only thing that stayed honest the whole time. The whole time. That was enough. We lost the shape of us, somewhere between routine and care. Not all at once, not loudly, just slowly, until love didn't know where to rest anymore. What used to fit naturally began asking for effort. I felt us adjusting constantly, like two hands that once held easily, now unsure how to align together. I thought love could stretch endlessly, that form didn't matter much, but love has a shape to it, and when it bends too long, it forgets how it used to feel like us. We lost the shape of us, and I felt it every day. Not broken, not dramatic, just unfamiliar in a quiet way. We didn't fight, we didn't fall, no moment to discuss. We lost the shape of us, and love couldn't recognize where it belonged with us. Still showed up on schedule, still knew what to say, but the spaces between our words didn't hold meaning the same way. I noticed how closeness hesitated, like it needed permission. Now I didn't know when us turned into something we had to manage, instead of feel without thinking about how I confused familiarity with connection, routine with being near. But love shouldn't feel like remembering what used to fit, instead of living here. We lost the shape of us, I noticed it over time, in the way my honesty paused unsure if it still had a place to arrive. You said we're just going through things, like shape didn't matter much. We lost the shape of us. neither heart wants to look, because reshaping requires honesty, and honesty asks you to choose to rebuild or let go of what you once took for granted. I didn't need us to be perfect or return to what we were. I just needed to feel like we still recognize each other when we stood close and said we. Now I listen for how love fits, not just if it stays around. I trust the connection that feels natural, that doesn't ask my heart to constantly adjust itself to be found. I want love that knows its own shape, that doesn't blur or fade. I don't wanna lose myself again, trying to hold something that no longer knows what it's meant to be. But because I remember the good, I remember us without bitterness, without forcing what couldn't stay. We lost the shape of us, and choosing myself is how I learned love should feel recognizable and real, not something you keep reshaping to survive, not something that leaves your heart wondering if us still exists or only lives in memory and time. Some love doesn't disappear, it loses its form. And if you lost the shape of us, you weren't careless, you weren't noticing that love had changed so much and no longer knew how to hold you the way it once did. You deserve a love that still knows its shape with you. Your goodbye had no sound, no words to prepare me for it. You stayed in the room with your body, but your heart had already packed and left. Nothing slammed shut between us, no sentence marked the end. I felt the absence arrive early, like something quiet I wasn't meant to question or defend. I thought goodbyes needed language, a moment you could hear. But some goodbyes move silently and leave you standing there, still near. Your goodbye had no sound, and that was the hardest part. Not sudden, not dramatic, just quiet as it settled in my heart. We didn't fight, we didn't break, no closure to be found. Your goodbye had no sound, and I learned how endings can happen without ever making one. Spoke like we were continuing, like nothing had changed at all. But your attention stayed elsewhere, already answering a different call. I learned how to read what wasn't said, the space where warmth used to stay. You didn't say you were leaving, you just stopped meeting me halfway. I confuse quiet with patience, stillness with yourself when love feels thinner, when presence loses its weight. I don't wait for words anymore. I notice when effort fades. I don't need a goodbye spoken to know when someone's already walked away. A goodbye had no sound, and I stayed longer than I should. Not because I didn't feel the truth, but because I remembered the good. I remember us without bitterness, without rewriting what we were. Your goodbye had no sound, and choosing myself is how I learned love doesn't always end in words. Sometimes it leaves in silence and space. Sometimes the clearest goodbye is the one your heart hears before your ears ever do. Some goodbyes don't echo, they fade. And if your goodbye had no sound, you weren't ignored. You were witnessing a love that left quietly because it no longer knew how to stay. You deserve a goodbye that honors your heart, or a love that never leaves at all. My heart learned timing, not from clocks or calendars. It learned from waiting too long, from moments that almost arrived but never stay where we were. I used to speak the second I felt, reach before things were ready. I didn't know love had a rhythm, and mine kept breaking against yours that never met me. I thought honesty meant immediacy, that truth should rush to be heard. But timing is part of tenderness, and love can be lost when it arrives too early or too late. My heart learned timing, and it hurts to understand. Not slower, not colder, just wiser about to open my hands. We didn't fall, no reason to explain. My heart learned timing and realized some love misses you, not because it's wrong, but because it's never aligned. I noticed how you spoke when it was safe, how silence protected you more. I learned to hold my feelings back, not to manipulate, but to see if space invited you forward. I waited without making noise, let effort choose its place. Some people only show up when timing favors them, not when love asks them to stay. I confuse patience with postponing, hope with standing still, but love shouldn't require perfect timing. Just to me, your will. My heart learned timing, I felt it shift inside, in the way my honesty softened, waiting to see if it was welcome this time. You said, why didn't you tell me sooner? Like sooner would have changed the end. before I speak, feel the room before I move. I trust the love that meets me naturally, that doesn't make me guess when I'm allowed to be true. I don't rush my feelings anymore or force them to arrive. I let my heart choose moments where presence exists, not just possibility or time. My heart learned timing, and I stayed longer than I should. Not because I didn't feel the misalignment, but because I remember the good. I'll remember us without bitterness, without blaming who was late. My heart learned timing, and choosing myself is how I learn. Love should arrive when both hearts are ready, not when one keeps adjusting the pace, not when one heart is present and the other is always almost in the right place. Timing isn't strategy, it's truth. And if your heart learned timing, you didn't lose your softness, you learned discernment. You learned that love isn't just about feeling, it's about being met when you do. This is how I love now, quieter than before. I don't rush into the feeling, I let it knock gently at the door. I notice how presence arrives, how effort holds its shape. I don't assume love will stay, I watch what it does when nothing is being chased. I thought love meant giving everything all at once without delay, but love also means listening to what feels steady and what quietly pulls away. This is how I love now, with my feet on the ground, not guarded, not afraid, just honest about what I allow. We didn't break me into this, no lesson screamed out loud. This is how I love now, when my heart finally feels safe, and how it's allowed to slow down. I don't over-explain my feelings or apologize for my pace. I trust the love that stays curious, that doesn't need convincing to remain. I give warmth where it's returned, I step back when it's not. I don't turn my tenderness to proof for someone who hasn't asked to hold it. I confused intensity with intimacy, endurance with being strong. But love shouldn't feel like survival or like I have to outlast what's wrong. This is how I love now, and it feels unfamiliar, not smaller, not less open, just clearer in what I consider real. You used to say I love too deeply, like depth was a flaw. This is how I love now, and depth stays where it's met, not where it's ignored. didn't grow cold or reserve. I just learned my heart deserves reciprocity, not effort that has to be earned. Ooh, now I let love arrive naturally, without pressure or disguise. I trust the way my body softens when something feels mutual, when it doesn't make me shrink or try. I want love that notices me, that chooses me out loud. I don't wanna wonder if I matter. I wanna feel it the way I'm held right now. This is how I love now, and I stay longer than I should. Not because I didn't know better, but because I remembered the good. I remember who I was gently, the one who loved without defense. This is how I love now, and choosing myself is how I learn. Love should feel steady and shared, not something you manage or chase, not something that teaches your heart to wait quietly for proof that never arrives in place. This isn't me loving less, it's me loving honestly. And if this is how you love now, you didn't change for the worse, you grew. You learned that love can be soft and still protect you.